Hello, my name is Rita Alcaire. I am an anthropologist and a documentary filmmaker. Currently, I am a postdoctoral researcher at the Center for Social Studies at the University of Coimbra, Portugal. For the past 2 decades, I have been using audiovisual methodologies and arts-based research centered on the study of gender and sexualities, mental health and pop culture, and have been focusing a big part of my academic work on communication. In this masterclass, I am going to talk about gender equality and inclusive communication in research and innovation activities, addressing practical aspects that can contribute to improving your everyday practice in teaching, supervising, mentoring, and researching. Higher education institutions and those responsible for teaching, supervising, and mentoring are in a strategic position regarding creating and implementing recommendations that can be put into practice to enhance gender equality and celebrate diversity, going beyond the focus of interpersonal actions, such as the correct use of pronouns. There must be a strategic recognition of structural issues that create barriers. This involves creating an equitable and inclusive environment that recognizes and responds to the diversity of lived experiences and existing identities, putting into practice concrete measures to overcome obstacles that arise and to promote equality and diversity. Gender equality and inclusive communication in higher education imply integrating a gender perspective into all aspects of your practice and recognizing how gender biases impact learning, personal and academic growth, and the success of students and researchers, as well as the way research is done. To do so, we must pay attention to the gender dimension in the contents that are lectured, in the references that are used and recommended, as well as other educational materials used and that consider different types of authorship and the learning needs of students from different genders and contexts. It is also related to the ability to understand how what is transmitted is learned in the context of classes and work groups composed of people of different genders and backgrounds. So let us first take a quick look at how language makes us as much as we make language. The complex relationship between society and language has been studied at least since the 19th century. Language allows us to understand and make sense of the world while helping us organize our thoughts and build our reality. In addition to being essential for living in society, because it is through language that social cultural experiences occur, it is also necessary for people to build an individual and a social identity, understand it, and share it with others. Because of this, language is constantly impacted by social cultural variables specific to each community, such as historical events, sociological phenomena, and ideological inclinations. Language issues began to gain greater scope in the 1960s with the second wave feminism in the United States of America, and the topic quickly began to be discussed in some of the most prominent linguistic circles. It has been studied how languages reflect the sexist nature of societies in which we circulate and are full of connotations, expressions, and linguistic constructions that describe women as secondary, subservient, or even sexual objects for men. To counteract this scenario, there was an effort to balance linguistic treatment between men and women, including the feminization of names and social roles that were reserved only for men. Besides feminization, language neutralization is also resorted to, where gender marks are erased from sentences. The use of masculine to refer to groups that are not composed exclusively of men is problematic, in that it contributes to the conceptual invisibility of people who are not men, since among other aspects, the most accessible mental frame of a masculine word is that of a group exclusively composed of men, regardless of the intention of the source of that message. Several studies show the advantages of inclusive and gender-neutral language, for example, when talking about job expectations. Replacing fireman with firefighter, or policeman with police officer, or stewardess with flight attendant helps children see that anyone, regardless of their gender, can pursue any profession they are passionate about. It encourages them to challenge traditional gender norms and fosters a more inclusive and diverse society. The third wave of feminism and the emergence of queer theory, which reflects on sexual roles and identities beyond heterosexuality and gender beyond the binary, has once again revolutionized the paradigm of natural languages. Several discursive strategies were created that changed the way of communicating with and about people. For example, resorting to the use of X, asterisk, at, or underscore in place of vowels, such as what is happening in the Portuguese language, which is very gendered. In Portuguese, it is also common to find the E replacing the A, which is present at the ending of feminine words, and the O, which is present at the ending of masculine words, to neutralize gender. Changes were also made in grammar, as in the case of the newly enunciated pronouns such as hen, a Swedish gender-neutral pronoun used for non-binary individuals and as a generic singular pronoun form, or il, a pronoun in the French language, intended as an alternative to gender-specific pronouns such as elle, she, or il, he. Il has been adopted by the Le Robert Dictionary, but has not been officially accepted by the Académie Française. In Portugal, the ELU system established personal neo-pronouns such as ele or aquele to refer, for example, to non-binary people. The X and at are not verbalized and can cause problems in translating written to oral texts and create challenges for blind and dyslexic people. The ELU system uses vowels in place of other vowels, and for this reason it is considered a good option for the Portuguese language. Neutral and inclusive language must also be included in official documents. In 2008, the European Parliament drew up a set of stylistic recommendations for the use of neutral language, and in Portugal, the Economic and Social Council also published a manual on inclusive language, which encouraged the use of passive voice and invariable pronouns. Neutral language shouldn't be the responsibility and a heavy load that falls on the shoulders of trans and non-binary people. This is not an issue that only concerns those who do not fit in the binary system, but is a powerful instrument to make societies more inclusive. Therefore, the implementation of inclusive language is one of the many pathways we must take to build a society of equals. Everyone needs to play a role as a civic agent of change and contribute to reach spaces such as the media and schools at all levels of education, and language must be accompanied by other concerns for change to be effective. That is why, in the next section of this masterclass, I invite you to look at gender mainstreaming in different aspects of your practice in higher education, such as teaching, supervising, mentoring, and research. Gender mainstreaming in teaching, supervising, and mentoring refers to integrating a gender perspective into all aspects related to these practices and recognizing how gender biases can impact learning, personal and academic growth, and the success of students and early career researchers. Introducing a gender perspective shows consideration of the gender dimension in the contents that are taught, in academic references that are used and that are recommended, as well as other educational materials that are used and that consider the learning needs of students of different genders and different contexts. It also relates to the ability to understand how what is transmitted is learned in the context of classes or work groups composed of people of different genders and backgrounds. Some key considerations for gender mainstreaming in teaching and supervising and mentoring include gender training. Those responsible for teaching, supervising, and mentoring must have training in gender equality and sexual and gender diversity to increase their understanding and acceptance of all aspects concerning gender. To this end, awareness sessions, access to resources, and workshops centered on deconstructing stereotypes and prejudices, as well as the use of inclusive and neutral language, are crucial. There are several community-based organizations as well as institutions and academic projects that provide training in gender equality and gender diversity. Check for those that exist in your area. Recognize and address gender biases. People responsible for teaching, supervising, and mentoring must be aware to mitigate gender biases that exist in their professional practice or that they may have. It may include unconscious stereotypes such as preconceived ideas related to people's gender, which is not obvious from their appearance, as well as assumptions about gender in some areas of study. For example, the stereotypical idea that women are only interested in areas connected to care and to social issues, while men remain exclusively interested in engineering and exact sciences. Along the same lines, you should be aware of how your course or field of study is publicized in the institutional website or social networks, what language and images are used, and how space is divided in your workplace. For example, in terms of access to public toilets that must be neutral to accommodate people of all genders and identities, guaranteeing their safety and privacy. Recognition of diversity and intersectionality. Gender is just one aspect of a person's identity, and there is a range of other identities and experiences that impact learning and personal, academic, and professional growth. People responsible for teaching, supervising, and mentoring must work to create a learning environment that recognizes and values diversity and provides support and opportunities for students and early career researchers to progress. Inclusive or neutral language. Using inclusive or neutral language can help create a more welcoming and inclusive environment for students and researchers of all genders. This includes using neutral terms whenever possible and avoiding assuming gender and sexual orientation. Because gender is not obvious by appearance, at the same time to respect those who identify beyond the gender binary, encourage everyone to share their pronouns and the name they want to be addressed by. Ensuring equal opportunities. As someone responsible for teaching, supervising, and mentoring, you should aim to ensure equal opportunities for all people, regardless of their gender. It should happen at different stages, such as when distributing tasks and responsibilities and providing support and opportunities for growth and development. Group work tends to be divided according to stereotyped gender roles, with women taking on more managerial roles and men taking on more field and experimental work. This scenario is consistent with segregation in the professional context, which offers different career, recognition, and payment possibilities. To break the stereotype, work must be distributed so that knowledge is learned, new knowledge is learned, and new skills are exercised. That must be your goal. Include different contexts and references. Ask yourself about the contents that you are teaching, the references, models, and images you use and you recommend. Gender-sensitive curricula include content that reflects a wide range of gender identities, experiences, and perspectives, authorship of different genders, of different geographical contexts, and knowledge that is not necessarily academic. It also includes the representation of diverse genders in educational materials, in the examples that are given in the classroom, and in case studies that are chosen. Gender-sensitive curricula create a safe environment for equal participation of all people, empowers students and early career researchers of all genders to critically analyze and challenge norms and stereotypes, and encourage them to become agents of change in their academic context and their communities. This includes promoting social justice and human rights as core values, as well as promoting active citizenship skills and social activism. Another area where gender mainstreaming must be included is research. Gender mainstreaming in research refers to the integration of a gender perspective into all aspects of research and involves recognizing and addressing how gender influences the research topic, the questions that are asked, the methodology that is chosen, the analysis of data, and the results. It involves moving beyond traditional gender binaries and recognizing the diversity of experiences, identities, and gender expressions that exist. Here are some positive actions and practical strategies for integrating a gender perspective into different stages of research. Throughout the entire process, use gender-neutral language. Inclusive and gender-neutral language should be used when framing research questions, hypotheses, and conclusions. This helps avoid reinforcing gender stereotypes and biases that may exist in society. When defining the topics, make an assessment of gender stereotypes. Consider how gender assessments, including stereotypes about what is considered to be male or female, might affect what you want to research, what questions to ask, and how to address them. What dimensions to consider. Reflect on whether gender is important to understanding the phenomenon being researched, and if so, what other dimensions can be considered, such as age, ethnicity, level of schooling, income, occupation, geographical origin, geographical location, or disability. The literature review. Assess what authorship and reference choices are being made. Are academic references and other sources being considered? Do they come from different geographical contexts and fields of action, academic or otherwise? Is the academic literature that is being reviewed linking gender issues with your research field? In the design and implementation of research topics and methodologies. Themes and methods must consider a gender dimension and explain how it will be articulated. In the composition of the team, question whether the people who make up the team should have specific training in gender. In the collection of methods. The methods chosen, such as questionnaires, focus groups, interviews, art-based research, and other methods, must be designed in a way that considers possible gender differences and similarities. Will the data that will be collected be differentiated by gender? Are you ensuring that people participating in the project are diverse in terms of gender, age, and other variables? Diversity of participants. Check that the people who will participate in the research, such as interviewees, focus groups, or other people involved in the project, represent diverse gender identities as well as different ages, socioeconomic backgrounds, and cultures. This will ensure that research results are representative of the population and help identify how gender intersects with other aspects of identity. Collaboration with community members. Collaborate with community members and community-based organizations to develop research questions and methodologies that are relevant to them. This helps to ensure that the research is sensitive and responsive to community needs, and that these results are useful in developing public policies and programs that address the specific need of different genders. In the expected results, consider whether research results might have different effects on different genders. Analyze data by gender. Data should be researched by gender to identify differences and similarities in outcomes for different genders. Consequently, it is possible to identify areas of inequality and factors that contribute to them. Also important is to address stereotyped assumptions about gender when interpreting the data and trying to understand if there are other important dimensions to consider. In other words, not only researching gender differences, but also understanding that research and innovation can have different consequences for different groups. Do an intersectional analysis. Do an analysis that considers how gender interacts with other aspects of identity, such as ethnicity, age, or socioeconomic status. This will help identify how multiple aspects of identity impact individual experiences and outcomes. Provide gender-sensitive information. Provide information that addresses specific needs of different genders. This will help ensure that policies and programs are effective in addressing gender-based disparities. In dissemination and communication. Ensure that the gender dimension is included in the presentation of results and that inclusive or neutral language is used. If the gender dimension is included, is it done in a way that does not reproduce stereotyped notions about gender, but also analyzes variations with different categories of gender? Consider that regardless of your area of expertise, the dissemination of research results can be directed to networks and scientific institutions that address gender issues. Generally speaking, gender equality and inclusive communication in research and innovation activities requires a commitment to creating a research and learning environment that is equitable and responsive to the diversity of experiences and identities among students, researchers, and communities. To this end, it is essential that those responsible for teaching, supervising, and mentoring are trained in gender equality and breaking stereotypes, can recognize and address gender biases, recognize diversity and intersectionality, use inclusive and neutral language, and ensure equal learning opportunities and progression. Gender equality and inclusive communication in research and innovation activities also implies a recognition that the way we design research and its results are interconnected and affect each other mutually. By establishing a gender perspective in research, ways of doing work will change, and in the medium term, the work outputs will also change. To this end, a gender perspective must be considered at all stages of research, when defining the subject and whom it will include in the design and implementation of research, in data analysis and production of results, in dissemination and communication, and throughout the entire process. Just before we finish, let me remind you that gender equality and inclusive communication are beneficial for everyone and everyone's responsibility. Throughout this masterclass, we addressed that subject and pinpointed a great number of practical aspects to challenge and improve your everyday practice in teaching, supervising, mentoring, and researching. I am Rita Alcaire, and I hope you enjoyed it.